Moses had a burning bush. I, on the other hand, had a magnificent mother. When I was 19 years old, I remember sitting at the kitchen table, getting ready to go back to college for my sophomore year, and having a conversation with my mom about what I was going to major in. I was going to have to start choosing a major, and she asked me what I wanted to do, and I told her some things that I was thinking about, but I wasn't really sure. And my mom said to me, "Well, have you ever thought about becoming a Unitarian minister?" And I responded like most 19-year-olds do when their mother makes a suggestion. "Mom, no, that is the dumbest idea I think I've ever heard." And my mom, I'm really pleased. She's actually visiting. She's in town, so she's going to be here at the second service. And I'm really glad she's going to be able to hear me tell you this story, because I don't think she's ever heard me telling anyone this story. She went on to name 5 or 6 different qualities that she saw in me that she thought would make me a good minister. Unitarian minister, in fact. She was very specific about that. But anyway, I just thought it was crazy, and you know, I was still living a pretty wild life at 19 in college in New Orleans at Tulane University, and the idea that I was going to be a minister seemed as ludicrous as just about any idea I had heard to that point. But it lit a spark in me. It just lit a little spark, a little ember that began to grow over the years. I started to look at myself a little bit differently. I started to look at my place in the world a little bit differently. And I eventually, it was 6, 7 years later and a lot of other trials and travails and travels later that I realized that this was indeed what I was meant to do, what I wanted to do, and where my heart was. And at one point, along my journeys, I met an African shaman named Malidoma Some, and he told me about his tribe and the way that they understand calling and a child's calling and a person's calling. They say in his tribe, and I've later learned that this is common in many tribal cultures, there's an idea, they believe in ancestors, that ancestors, after they die, they remain sort of in the other world, but kind of up above, like we call it a cloud of witnesses that are above us, that are there watching the tribe, watching the community, and they know what the community needs. So the tribe, each time a child is born, the ancestors are up there looking down, knowing what they need, and they package the soul of the child that's about to be born with the gift, the talent, the skill, the knowledge, whatever that is that the tribe needs for its very survival, in order to thrive, in order to survive. And then they send that soul down into that baby, into the womb and into that baby at like sacred cargo to be born through that child. And the adults in the community recognize that their role is to help each child realize their divine gifts in this world. They realize that the survival of the very community is dependent upon each child discovering and realizing and sharing that unique one-time gift that comes through each of us. And indeed, I believe, and we teach at this church a similar idea, that each child, we don't teach our children that they're born sinners and tainted in ways that go way back in time in need of some cosmic redemption, but we teach every child, we look at every child in our Sunday school as gifted, as someone who has come into this world with something to offer our world, our church, our community, our families, and we try to help them by inspiring their curiosity and by putting them into different situations and giving them opportunities to learn so that they can discover who they are, hopefully lighting a little spark in them to figuring out who they are and what their purpose is and what they have to give. Now, of course, it's true of all of us, adults as well, and I hope that you will take a moment today to go through our activities fair and find out how you might share some of your gifts and your talents with our community this year. Maybe singing in one of our choirs. Maybe you'll help with the usher corps. Maybe you'll be on one of our boards or committees. Maybe you'll go help tutor in one of the schools that we've adopted, one of the 3 schools we've adopted. Or maybe you're handy with your hands and nails and hammers, and you'll help our house committee to rehab homes. But there's lots of ways to get involved and to be a part of. Maybe you want to teach a class. I don't know what that is, but I hope you'll take some time to discover what your gifts are and how you might share them with our church this coming year. The reason that Moses was called to lead his people out of bondage and into freedom, into a new promise, was because Moses was a border walker. Moses was a Jew, but he was raised in the Pharaoh's home. He was raised in Egypt, a prince of Egypt. And so because he could see 2 worlds, he could see different perspectives, he was in a unique position to lead his people to a new level of freedom and promise. In our own country, in the 20th century, we can think of another great example, Martin Luther King Jr., who was raised in the Jim Crow South, in segregated communities, in the black church, but who went on to the North, to the elite academies in Boston University and other places, got his PhD and learned the ways of the North, where it wasn't segregated, and also the knowledge of those who went on to become elites and leaders in the community. And he took those perspectives, and that allowed him to be the leader at the time, to lead our entire country towards a greater sense of our own promise, towards our own sense of promised land here in America. Gandhi has a very similar story, having grown up in India, a Hindu, going off to South Africa, having experiences, coming back and leading his land to freedom. It's a very common story about being a border walker and how that ability to see different perspectives allows us to bring people together in new ways. Now, our church, this kind of religion that we are a part of here, it attracts border walkers. People who can see multiple perspectives. People who aren't thinking that there's just one way and one belief and one scripture and one way that God speaks to people. And so we attract people who happen to be able to see different perspectives and often help build bridges between the religious and the non-religious, between people of different faiths, traditions, and cultures.